Hi, this is Shauna. Before we get to today's guest, I want to take a minute to learn more about you, the listener. We've put together a short survey at fueltalent.com/podcast to gather information on who's listening and to give you a chance to make suggestions and comments about the show. I want What Fuels You to be a great resource for you and your interests, and I hope these interviews give you practical advice along with inspiration for your career and life. Help us continue to serve you better by going to fueltalent.com/podcast. Thank you so much. Now let's start today's show. Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Derek Streat. Derek is the co-founder and CEO of DexCare, a data-driven intelligence company that makes healthcare access better for everyone. He is an accomplished healthcare technology entrepreneur and executive, having co-founded and/or led 6 venture-backed companies, including 3 in health tech and 4 acquired by public companies. Prior to joining Providence as an entrepreneur in residence to commercialize DexCare, Derek served as vice president of digital solutions at Johnson & Johnson, after it acquired his surgical AI company, CSATs. Derek is also actively involved in national healthcare data transparency efforts for the improvement of patient care as a co-founder and board member of 2 leading data sharing organizations, PEDSnet and Improving Renal Outcomes Collaborative. Welcome, Derek. Good to see you.
Thanks. Good to see you, Shauna.
We're going to start with some rapid fire. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Okay. I'm curious if you are watching something or listening to something or reading something that you're kind of into right now that you want to share.
Well, so I am reading something right now, but I will admit I am much more of a TV junkie. The readers in our family are my wife and daughter. But I am reading Team of Teams, written by General Stanley McChrystal, who was head of the Joint Operations Command against Al-Qaeda in Iraq about 20 years ago. And it's a really cool take on how you just get kind of distributed leadership and get things done without doing it in a top-down hierarchy. The more fun stuff I'm doing is I'm really into this show, Yellow Jackets. We just finished Miss Maisel, which is really good as well.
Love, yeah.
Session as well, but yeah, like those kinds of shows.
Okay. And curious, I don't know if you're a foodie, but what's your favorite type of cuisine, like last meal?
I like, being in the Northwest, and I'm not from the Northwest, so it's odd, but being in the Northwest for long enough, you got to be into sushi. And so we're a big sushi family as well. And, the cool thing about Seattle is there's so many places you can go that there's a wide range of prices to get sushi in this city, which is important when you have 2 kids that devour it as well. So
yeah, exactly.
The sushi place for my wife and I, and then we have the kids' sushi place, and there's always.
Tell me your favorite sushi spot for like splurge.
There's one actually pretty close to our office. We just got super lucky on Eastlake called it's like Tapumaki, I think. It's right on Eastlake. It's like 3 blocks away from the Zoo Tavern, which is the other end of the spectrum. But it's super good. I didn't even know about it until I got here.
Oh, I think I've actually been there before. I know what you're talking about. I love it.
Exactly.
If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
I just did this in an event that we held the other day, actually with customers. That's funny. It's the same question. What I said was I'd love to stop time, but I would have a lot of like caveats I would put on it. So, I'd want to be able to have other people stop it with me, but be in the same reality at the same time. So I wouldn't just be alone, because that'd be kind of boring.
What traits do you most value in an employee?
Uh, you know, we're going through this right now too, actually, in the company with the values exercise. I really think that you've got to be super passionate and committed to what you're working on. I think that ends up trumping just about everything. Technical skills can be learned, and I don't mean just technology skills, but kind of the technical aspects of anything I think can be learned. It's really, you've got to, almost be kind of, committed to the point where you're legion to focus on, solving a really big problem. It's why I do the things that I do in my career, because they're usually not the path that's easiest traveled, and so you've got to have that level of commitment and passion about what you're doing to try to solve a challenging problem that has big impact. That's probably the most important thing.
That makes sense, because it does trump everything else, right? You're like, if you start with that core thing, and it kind of like almost just easily translates to, you would assume, to drive and grit, because if you're passionate, then all those other things kind of follow from there.
Yeah, it does end up supporting a lot of things, and it's interesting because sometimes it can be misconstrued by folks as like also being synonymous with, well, if I'm passionate about things, then I'm just kind of run unfettered at something. And so it's really easy. I've been guilty of this in my career. You kind of run at something, and so you think, hey, I'm so passionate about this, I'm so committed, I've got it figured out. I don't need to like listen to somebody else. I don't need to learn something. I can just run at it. And that's the hard part, right? Because then if you really are committed to solving something, then you eventually realize that you actually do need a lot of help, because we're all limited in what we can do individually. And so it's usually got to be kind of tempered with that as well. And with just some kind of humility that you've got to work together to solve big problems, specifically because you're so passionate about it that you could kind of, fly off the planet in the wrong direction if
like the counterpart, or I'm thinking almost like that sometimes when people say passionate, I almost get like a dreamy, like the person who's just kind of almost not flighty passionate, but just kind of like out there passionate, where they're lacking maybe the discipline and rigor around the passion. So yeah, you're right.
Focused.
Focused. What is your biggest fear? This is the lay on the couch part.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we were talking about kids earlier, right? That's probably, as a parent, right, we can all relate to it. I mean, it's that you don't do enough, for your kids to ultimately just end up happy, happy with life and what they're doing in whatever they do. And whether it's activities they're involved in when they're younger, and how hard you push or not, or opportunities you provide them, or going too far, and providing them too many opportunities or things too easily that could lead to behaviors down the road you don't want. I mean, there's all these things that I probably think about it way too much.
Parenting has become so crazy. It's just nuts. Well, childhood is so hard these days that of course this is going to be something that torments you. And it's such a testament to you as a person that you're thinking about this too much.
It's
right?
the hardest thing
ever.
It's the hardest thing. If life was just, coming into the office and building companies and, doing those kinds of things, it would be.
Well, you've clearly got that part figured out.
I end up thinking though, to the point of like, well, but what are the actions that we're taking, in our house every day and where do they lead to down the road? And so like an example would be, so this is going to sound a little neurotic here, but I'm of the mind that, that one of the things you should do every morning is you should make your bed. It's the one thing you can come back to at the end of the day saying, even if it's a bad day, I've accomplished this thing. And
you set the tone for the day.
And so I try to like instill this in my kids, and my 11-year-old like looks at me like I don't know what I'm talking about. Like how in the world could making your bed have any impact at all on my day of playing, my day of getting this homework done, my day of going to the baseball game, my day of this or that. And so, but I think as parents, like those little things like those little things. You're so intimately connected to the little things that happen, in your loved one's life every day. I mean, thousands of these things, thousands of them, that if you sit and think about it too long, right, you can start to get, at least I can start to get to a point where I'm like, well, if I don't really stress, this thing, or taking care of this pet or whatever it is, that could be the thing, right? That
Yeah.
at some
That's
point down the
interesting.
road,
But
right?
you're
That would
setting
be
the tone
great.
for that's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
I do think though what you're saying though is that you want to just make sure that you're leaving a legacy of strong values and guiding your children in the way that keeps them emotionally healthy, which is hard to do. But it sounds like you're probably okay. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Pet peeve.
Or a pet peeve? I don't
Yeah,
think
I was
biggest
going to
pet
say
peeve. Yeah.
biggest.
What is a pet peeve?
You know, I would say there are some some that comes back to kids. You just sort of just it's like basic things, right? I mean, again, I have an 11 and 16-year-old, and they will very easily walk out of the house with, two different colored socks on, or hair not combed, or, oh, I'll just put a hat on over it. Just stuff it in there and it'll be fine. Those kinds of things. Just things that seem like pretty basic societal norms to me are tough for me to take a step back at sometimes and realize that, these are little growing humans that will eventually take some time to get those kinds of things, but it doesn't stop from annoying me when people aren't just doing the basics, especially those in my family.
Right. You're like, just like take care of yourself.
Should be easy. Be easy.
Keep it simple. Yeah. So you mentioned when we were talking, you're like, I'm not from Seattle.
Yeah.
So I know you went to school, University of Iowa. Are you from Iowa?
Yeah. Born and raised in Iowa, small river town, southeast corner of the state. Family, have still a family back there. I was just back there a couple weeks ago. So fond place in my heart for Iowa. I went to school there, worked in the Midwest in Minneapolis for a little bit, then came to the West Coast about 30 years ago.
Yeah. And when you were a kid, like, who did you look up to? Who were your heroes?
Well, so I went through, if I think back to when I was really young, I don't really recall then. I guess the two that I'd point out, I'll start with the kind of the more I don't know, kitschy one. So I just really got interested in like finance when I was in kind of freshman year in high school, and so I started doing finance things. I got my broker's license when I was still pretty young and in school, and I looked up to unfortunately I looked up to all these like Wall Streeters that turned out to be total villains,
like Michael Milken people.
Milken, exactly. And then there was like the movie version of Gordon Gekko, right? Just all of these people that not all of them, but some of them turned out to be villains, and so that was probably not the best thing. But I was really I looked up to them as just the world they were involved in were so complicated and kind of numbers driven that they just really intrigued me. So that's where I just at least spent a lot of time kind of reading about and learning about those folks. It wasn't all the crooks, by the way.
Did you look at Warren Buffett too?
Warren Buffett, being in the Midwest, you've got to connect there. The other thing, probably the more important one though, is that my parents got divorced when I was kind of middle school age, and I ended up living with my dad, and I just always looked up to my father, and he's made me what I am, and so he's been an inspiration on a number of fronts for me, and he's probably the main person that I spent the most time with and have the most respect for, even to this day.
Yeah. And is he in financial services?
No, my dad was very kind of had a career that you don't really see anymore. He was a same company his entire life. After he went to Vietnam, and then after he got back doing a tour there, he got his college degree, and then he worked for a company that started out as General Foods, and became Kraft Foods, and then became Philip Morris. And basically he was a traveling salesman, and so he covered a couple of states in the Midwest and would drive to grocery stores and sell product basically to those organizations. And it was just, I loved it growing up with that kind of a background because he was such a hard worker. And I have these very fond memories as a kid where, he would just some days, just because, he didn't have anybody watch me or whatever, and he had to be overnight or something, I would go with him on these trips, right? Or just to spend time together. And so we'd travel around Iowa, going to these grocery stores, and I would see him kind of working with the buyers at these stores, trying to convince them to buy, his products into the competitor, so many pallets of his product versus the competitor's products. And then we'd go and we'd move around product on the shelves, so his product
You get more visibility.
Yeah, it would show at the eye level, and
I love that.
Down. So I was, doing that as a kid, and it was just a lot of fun and just a really cool role. And he did it right and was able to retire early and, with a nice pension, and again, things you don't see anymore. But
no, you do not see those things. So you talk about him being kind of one of your heroes or someone that you really look up to. Is it from a perspective of, you mentioned his work ethic, or some of his, is it kind of where you got some of your core values, and how would you describe those, and what are you doing to kind of pass those along?
For sure, really good work ethic. It's probably where, ironically, my earlier comments come from, where my some of my stresses come from. But because again, really, really strong work ethic, strong focus on education, not like flashy education, not like, hey, let's do everything we can to get you into Harvard. Not that I have anything wrong with
like, no, but like learning for the sake of learning, like actually.
It was just like, look, like, figure out the things that are going to create value for somebody, because if you do that, then you're going to have all these opportunities open to you, and you can go all over the place to do that. So he just had a really just like practical view of the world, like that you could like put to work. It was tangible, it was real. And so that ethic definitely helped me out a lot. And then at the same time, he was very, very family focused. Like we never, other than when he had to travel, like we never missed a dinner at home, even if it was just him and me. We would still, he'd take time out to make sure that we were, doing trips that, road trips and so forth, to spend time together traveling and vacations and things like that. And just put a premium on just spending time, with your family as well. And then did the same kind of stuff that I was lamenting earlier, right? If I was walking out of the house with my two different socks on, or my hair not combed or something like that, I'd
so
hear
funny. You're like, look at you, you're turning into your dad.
I know. It's exactly what people
say. Here, and here we are.
It's like those, I love those progressive commercials, those progressive insurance commercials, because they're like so spot on.
Right. I know.
Yeah. It's just like, yep, we're all turning.
And then we all turn into our parents. Exactly. I know. So how did you choose University of Iowa? And of course I got it wrong. I know I looked at that school.
Yeah, it was, so, I mean, there's a few things. One, I mean, so I grew up an hour away. It was nice to have the connection there, but and I should say, and I would say, it was, as far as like college rankings go, it was decent for, the business. I went there for finance and computer science degrees, more known for finance than computer science. So but I would say it was decent. But I was able to focus on it as a place to kind of do all these other practical things. So I got my Series 6 license early for brokerage, and so I was able to work in Cedar Rapids, which was a town 40 minutes away, at an investment management firm. I had another that was one of my jobs.
That was the Terry Lockridge and Dunn job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then I also worked at a brokerage house that was right on campus there, and I was able to actually get some like the professors and other people involved in the firm, get some of their assets moved over and things like that. So it was just a really practical. It was a practical way for me to get an education in an area that I could apply it,
right.
And that was I just didn't have to think a lot about. Like I was very focused on how do I get to the next
Right. You're like, I'm ready to work.
place I'm trying to go. Yeah. So, and then finally, it doesn't. I mean, Iowa is as a state. Most people know this, but Iowa as a state has incredibly high graduation and standardized test scores, graduation rates and standardized test scores among other states in the country. Part of it's there's not a lot of people there, and they focus on practicality and hard work, and so as a the denominator helps there in doing those kinds of calculations. So it was also just a good place to go to school for that. So
yeah. And so based on what you were saying, just me and my dad, are you an only child?
no, I have one sister.
You have a sister.
Yeah, just one other. Yeah.
And is the whole family still in Iowa?
No, so father is there and he's remarried, and I have some aunts and cousins and so forth there. And then my mom's side and sister, they're in Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
They moved around, but have ended up settling in. They were in Seattle for a little bit where I'm at now, but have ended up back in Kentucky. They were earlier. So
yeah, interesting. Well, it looks like that early, like ninth grade version of yourself kind of went on and you pushed through and stayed in finance, but more on the like corporate finance, equity research. It looked like based on how you first started talking that you'd go more like trading, sales and trading.
yeah.
How did you decide to go corporate finance and equity research? And did you cover a certain sector?
Yeah. So what I found was that I was even pretty early on, I was pretty entrepreneurial. And so while I was enamored with the world of finance, I wasn't so enamored with it that I needed to be that needed to be all I ever do forever. I could always see a little bit forward to where I wanted to go. Because if that was the case, then I needed to get to New York, or I needed to get
or London,
or London. Exactly. It wasn't Minneapolis, right?
Not Minneapolis, not Iowa. Yeah.
Exactly. I definitely had to get out of Iowa to do it. There's insurance companies in Des Moines there, but that's about it.
Yeah.
But I went to Dane Bosworth. It's not part of Royal Bank of Canada in Minneapolis, the HQ there. They had a full trading desk, so big, good size for regional. And I found early on that I was always pretty entrepreneurial, and so I wanted to be interacting with companies, and the best way to do that in a finance way was through corporate finance. Commercial banking is another way to do it, but that's even more transactional. Trading never really appealed to me because that's almost the antithesis of working with companies, right?
Yeah, you don't touch it at all.
Yeah, it's all about, the company is sort of an afterthought. I
just transact.
Care about the security and what's happening in the market and kind of macro things. And I was never that way. I was always like, but I want to understand how you build a business, how you do these things. And I had some exposure to that at Terry Lockridge and Dunn. The founder of that firm also had bought some small companies in the area, and so he was gracious enough to let me be involved in those. So we had a sandwich, I don't even want to call it like a sandwich. It wasn't even like a manufacturer. It's like a sandwich assembler. Like this company that literally this small town in Lone Tree, Iowa, this like 200 person town where he had this little area, this assembly line where they would make sandwiches and then package them up and sell them to convenience stores in the area. And as I spent more time, that CEO of that company, his name was Woody, I remember, spent more time with people like that. I just got really enamored with building businesses. And so corporate finance was working with the CEOs and the organizations there to help build their businesses. I eventually started to see that as transactional, though, which led to my entrepreneurial career, but we'll probably get into that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I love it. The very first thing I read about as far as your first company, joeaverage.com.
Yeah.
How did you even get that name?
Yeah. So
how was it available? I mean, I guess it was a while ago, but I'm like,
it was web. It was like web, like
0.000. Yeah,
exactly.
But still, that's such a great name.
It was cool. Yeah. So the idea we had, so I did banking for a while, some people that we talked about earlier, you and I know, and then I just kept wanting to get closer and closer to companies, corporate finance, research, which allowed me to do that. And eventually I was just like, I just need to like do one of these finally. And so that was a time where, believe it or not, there was a time where, if you wanted to get things, particularly like deals on things, right? Whether it was, deals on books, or, a coupon from a, for money off of beers at a local bar, at a night at a local bar, whatever. Like, all of that stuff was still in like these paper coupon books, basically on college campuses. And so our idea we had was, well, we should like get all of those things, all those deals, all those coupons, all those things, and we should put them on this new fangled thing called the web, and
the World Wide Web.
Yeah, exactly. Information superhighway. And then students could just go and like go to Pages and print this stuff off and not have to like search around to find a coupon book or whatever. So and then we had an idea to kind of aggregate as well, kind of in a Groupon style, although this was 1996, so it was well before that. The thing is it was so early that we competed with these paper coupon books, and people were like, the paper coupon books are way easier than going to the internet, going to a computer, getting the access to this internet thing, taking 3 minutes to download a page, with a graphic on it. They were just like, I just use this coupon book and print it out. And so that didn't work out very well, but it was a good learning experience. And Joe Average, the idea behind Joe Average was that it should be stuff that an average person could.
Oh yeah. What happened to the name and the domain? And
I don't know. That's a good question. We eventually sold. Well, actually, I do know. We sold it into, although it wasn't a particularly large deal, but we sold it into a company, classmates.com, which is where I then spent some time at after that, which was a much more successful web one.
Yeah. I mean, you spent 6 years at Classmates.
I did. Yeah.
I mean, it looks like almost all of these roles, I did see, unless I'm not kind of seeing this pattern, but it almost seems like you come in, entrepreneur in residence, spin a company out, get acquired, and then you're the guy who's in like corp dev.
Yeah. So,
but is that your special sauce? I feel like all CEOs have like, some are like, I'm an actual engineer masking as a CEO, but it seems like you're BD, corp dev, sales.
Yeah.
Is that your jam?
Yeah. So you're getting some of the elements there, so that we can unpack that a little bit. So what's worked out for me, well, Shauna, is I don't have to be the one to have the idea, to come up with the idea. I think when people I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs get so focused on that, it's a bit of hubris, and they can't see forest through the trees. There's all that. Whereas my view is like, there are so many smart, talented people out there that have great ideas, maybe have some traction on those ideas. And what they need is they need a catalyst to actually pull together the resources, the team, and then drive towards execution on a broader vision to actually create something really special. And so usually, although Classmates was not this way, I'll come back to that second, but usually the best place to do that, I find, is as an EIR inside of, I've done it inside of a few venture firms. I've done it inside of a large university, and like, they've got all sorts of cool stuff.
Yeah, I saw you did that at UW. Yeah.
And then most recently, I did it at a large health system that has Yeah. And so I've just found that. So when you ask about superpower, and I can say this without, I think without sounding too cavalier, because I also know there's a bunch of things I'm not that good at, but the stuff that I've found success with are being able to see kind of not what something is, but what it can become, and then stitching together the things you would need to do to get there, which I usually start at early stage. Almost always a piece of that is, I've got to get people smarter than us, myself included, people smarter than me, involved in this pretty fast in these different areas. We've got to get some capital behind this. I'm a believer that, if you really want to try to solve big problems, you need to leverage other people's money, because there's just usually not enough. I mean, the wealthiest people in the world, when they're solving big problems, they go and they still usually don't have enough money because they want to solve a bigger problem that requires something bigger than them to do that, which is usually other people's money or government or something like that to make something happen. And so, my ability is to again, see where something could go and what it could become, create that strategy to stitch it together. And then my job as CEO is like 99% of it's always resourcing and keeping that team, those resources kind of focused on that bigger idea. The tactical then execution, if I've done my job right, ends up being done by, again, people that are much better than me at doing those things. And being inside a venture firm or a university or a large corporate, Providence is not profit, but similar. You just you're able to. I found that I'm able to find the things that are so compelling that when you put that strategy or vision around it, it becomes a gravitational force for those people and resources. They want to be part of it then at that point, not because of me, but because of what this thing could actually become. And then they want to do it together. And it comes back to that passion we talked about earlier, because now we're all focused on, hey, we could change the world on something here. And that gets super exciting.
Yeah. So I'm writing it down though, because I'm like, okay, so the things that you're talking about, there is a little bit of like a theme, because if you talk about, what they all kind of do require an ability to sell and influence, because you're talking about talent acquisition, basically bringing good people together, identifying talent, closing them on your vision. Talent acquisition, that's some sort of selling, right? Fundraising, getting people to give you money. That's hard to do. Not everybody's good at that. I'm curious to know if you enjoy that process. Any advice that you have for others who have gone out to raise? Curious about your ideas around that, or even your strategies around talent acquisition. And then the other part of it is almost like a different side of the brain, which is, sounds like you're probably pretty strong operationally and strong with your organizational skills, to kind of keep the wheels on the bus, to keep everybody else doing what they need to do.
Yeah. So a couple of things there. I mean, on the talent side, I mean, you're much more pro at it than I am. The one that didn't work out, which was that Joe Average one. I think part of it was, I mean, I was very young and I didn't really appreciate that. I just needed to have people better than me involved in that business. And that's not to say I'm, trying to move myself out of the CEO role. None of us are smart enough, resourced enough, good enough to be able to make truly transformative change in any domain without continually up-leveling the people that we're working with.
100%.
Yeah. And just honestly drafting all of them, right? I mean, I have the easiest job in the world when I have the best people working here. And so that's a key thing. On the money side, I mean, it's helped that I was interested in finance early on, and then having a banking background, it helps me on the technical aspects of it. Understanding deal structures and how things work and negotiation and things like that. But you're right, a lot of it's selling, right? There's not a huge difference. If you look at our deck, right, in any company for selling to a customer versus selling to an investor, there's
or to a candidate even.
Or to a candidate, exactly. There's 70% overlap in the slides, literally the same slides. And so there's just some other stuff, right? You got to have a use of proceeds, slide for this one, right? Versus that. So there is selling on it. And at the end of the day, that's about seeing, what something can become, having it be transformative, because, life's too short. What's the point of doing any of this stuff if we're not going to do something that's transformative? And then in an area that counts, and hopefully we'll talk about healthcare here in a little bit, and then doing it. And so, if you have those things, and then you add on the piece, right? I said that was and let's get the best people here as well. I mean, who wouldn't invest in that, right? I mean, then it becomes an easy process. And so, yeah, there is sales involved, but I don't really look at it as much that way. I suppose it is sales, but I look at it as
well, no, when you say it's sales, it almost sounds like it's when I'm talking to some of my team members about the word sales, I think can sometimes have energy around it. But no, I'm just saying because you've got such mellow, low key vibes. And I do learn a lot about recruiting by asking, even though I've done this for almost 30 years. I really learn a lot about recruiting from CEOs because most CEOs, it's a huge part of a CEO's job. Huge part.
Yeah. When I look at, successful CEOs, particularly of very large organizations. So I sold a company at one point to Johnson & Johnson, and that was the largest company I've ever been in. I was there for about 1.5 years, but I was fortunate enough to be able to interact a bit with the then CEO at the time, Alex Gorski, and the new CEO, Joaquin Duato there. And, you mentioned like Mello and things like that. Talking to those guys, there is no way you would think that they are running, an $80 billion company that's been around for 150 years and has 250,000, employees. And I remember Alex telling me one time, he said, at my level, every decision is gray. There is no right or wrong answer in everything that comes to me, because everything else that has a right or wrong answer goes to somebody else. And so I get the stuff where, I don't know, it could be right or wrong. I just got to do my best to figure it out.
You have to just use your gut and information that you can. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the point is like, if you're not, so I think sometimes people can misconstrue. I'm not saying you're doing this, but I think sometimes, particularly like investors, when I'm like raising capital and I've raised a lot of money, will misconstrue when I have these conversations. They'll actually use the word mellow sometimes. They'll be like, "Oh, you're so mellow compared to like the Silicon Valley CEOs we're talking to." And I'm like, look, the people that I've met that are most successful, their mellowness, I think, is one of the things that makes them successful, because they don't freak out when something goes wrong.
Yeah.
It's going to go wrong at some point, but they, stay with the ship and figure it out. And that comes back to, again, my upbringing, just being very practical about how you go about things. And
it could also be like, the word could also be humble. Here you are, you're like pumping out some other kick-ass company. Are you like a person who, like, did you try to take a break after that? Like, walk me through your headspace around that acquisition. It was in March 2018, right?
Yeah, so that was the third one that we had sold, and I say we because I've been fortunate enough to develop relationships with people where I can at least usually have one or two of them come on to the next thing, and so that was in 2018, and I didn't really stop after that, and so that comes back to a bit we haven't chatted about yet, but so I got into healthcare. I have a daughter who ended up with a pretty serious illness when she was about 9 months old. Well, it started 9 months. It kind of peaked at like 1.5 years. And once we in our family, we stopped everything that we were doing. We stopped all the work. Luckily, was in between companies then, so was able to do that and focused on her care, got her stabilized, and long story short, she ended up having a kidney transplant when she was 3, and she's doing very well now. She's doing very well now. But I made a commitment at that point that everything I would do was going to be in healthcare. So I've got nonprofit work that I do and for-profit work, but it's all healthcare all the time. And the issue is just the problem and the opportunity. It's actually a phenomenal space to be an entrepreneur in if you've got kind of a more practical attitude on life, because it's a target rich environment of tons of problems to solve.
Oh yeah, I'm like, where do you even begin and end? It's endless.
Yeah, and that require though immense fortitude. The reason tech often doesn't work out in healthcare is because people are looking for some quick win to try to move out of something, and it's just, that's not how this world works. It's serious. It's healthcare. And so, we did a bunch of really good work at Johnson & Johnson, actually at the company's called CSAT that we spent on UW.
Yeah.
Johnson. And whenever you sell a company, there's financial return, but the thing you really want as entrepreneurs, you want to know that people are taken care of. They have the opportunity to work on at least as cool stuff as they were working before, and then maybe more opportunity beyond that. And that endures, right? So that doesn't just get shut down. And I'm thankful to say it's, that company now, that technology is one of the lobes of the digital brain at J&J that powers, smart instrumentation, robotic surgery, and things like that. And the people are working on super cool things. And so, we got to a point in that company, without going too much detail, where we were able to prove, prove that we could watch first humans and eventually AI could watch a surgeon and how they moved in an intraoperative field, and we could predict near misses and complications and readmits and all these things that, the average person goes through 7 surgeries in their lifetime. So we all have them.
Wow.
And there's huge variability in how people operate and what they do and whether or not they even use a standard or a practice. And there's a lot of bad stuff that happens when things go wrong. And so we got to a point where we could predict this stuff, and it became used and still is by half of the largest health systems in the country and in the world's largest healthcare company, Johnson & Johnson.
Wow.
And still that is a tiny minuscule sliver of what it means to address healthcare in this country. It really only applies in those 7 different times in your life when you're going to be in an operating room dealing with something that is so serious that it needs surgery. But healthcare impacts every other aspect of our life, from what we eat to what we do to to environments we're involved in, to the social networks that we're part of, to all these other things. And so that's a very long way of saying, like, great, we checked off that box, did some cool work in surgery, good exit, all that kind of stuff, but we're just scratching the surface on making an impact. And so, that just provides that provides an ability to do the next one even bigger, but still in this healthcare space. And we'll probably never touch bottom on it because it's such a big problem and area to address. But there's really no, better or worse, there's no, there's really no opportunity, I guess I would say, to stop, right? Because the problems persist.
Yeah. Well, I'm super inspired by your passion. It's incredible. How did the Providence EIR position come about, and how did it overlap with COVID? Was it like, I know it was 2020. Were we talking like March 2020?
Yeah. So that was interesting. So we sold CSATs in 18. I was there until middle of kind of 2019. It was kind of on a nice path then inside of J&J at that point. It didn't really need me, the next level there. And so then I moved on, and I started talking to, at the time, Aaron Martin was, he's since moved back over to Amazon, running healthcare for Amazon, but he was running the digital group at Providence. Providence was a customer of ours at CSATs as well. And so I've known Aaron and that team for quite well. And we just started talking about what's next. Again, like I said earlier, I don't need to be the one with the idea. And so he had this platform that he'd been working on to make care more accessible. So talked about surgery earlier, which is a tiny part of healthcare. Probably the biggest part of healthcare is access, is how do we access healthcare? It quite literally that word. How do you get access to people that can help you, people and resources, facilities, et cetera, that can help you be healthier? And he had an idea for this platform that was going to try to make care more accessible at Providence. Providence is a $27 billion, 50 hospital health system serving 7 states. It's a big one in our country, and so it's a great platform to do it. So I was intrigued by what they had built there. They were only using it inside of Providence, but it was it had some good traction initially. So then I thought, okay, this is another platform to come in and see what they've got going on, and see if I could see if there's a business there that we could spin out as something more transformative than just inside of Providence. And so my very first day when we finally reached terms was April 1st of 2020. Yeah, which was like the weirdest day to start something new. But without going too much into it, like a lot of things in healthcare, in a lot of spaces, right? Pandemic changed things pretty dramatically, and in some ways for the better. In our case, the for the better way was this understanding, realization among consumers and patients and providers and health systems that you could start to virtualize some of this care and get
100%,
more scale. Yeah. And so they had a platform that just was kind of made for that moment. I brought in some of my team from CSATs. We then set up a company, co-founded a company along with Providence then to to take this platform then out to other health systems, and now are growing pretty dramatically and working with health systems even larger than Providence now. We help improve care access for our catchment area is about 25% of the U.S. population now at this point, and so it's been scaling quite a bit.
Oh my God, it's incredible. Okay, so describe to the listeners, because I did all sorts of research and I'm pretty obsessed with the company, I got to be honest. Describe to the listeners though what the company does, because there's so many healthcare, like health tech companies out there.
Yeah.
So describe DexCare. I know there's like patient access and the scheduling and all the care coordination, but describe what it does.
Yeah, so DexCare, our core platform is we call it care orchestration platform for demand in healthcare, which in healthcare means patients, right, that are demanding care, and supply, which in healthcare means the facilities and providers and they're supplying care. And so we orchestrate between those two across all service lines of care, which could be things like primary care or surgeries or urgent care, all sorts of things. And then when you go a level deeper, what that means is we work with health systems like Providence or Kaiser or Mass General or a whole bunch of them to take all those ways where they offer care, virtual care and primary care and urgent care, all these things, make it so that you as a consumer or patient can find it a lot more easily online. So you don't need to go to their website. You could be searching for things in Google. You could be on some health website. You could be in a marketplace, et cetera. But you can very easily find care when you're looking for it. Easy link to get to it. And then what we'll do is, as we learn a little bit more about what you need and what you're looking for, we'll make sure we're matching you up with those resources that supply those providers and settings and service lines, et cetera, in a way that works well for everybody. Because part of and by everybody I mean not just patients, but providers and health system. Because part of the thing that's really been a disservice to kind of accessing healthcare in this country, there's a lot of things, but one of the things that's been a disservice is we tend to, when we think about access in this country, we tend to think of it in terms of like the most common channel, if you will, is I need to see a doctor, especially if it's a specialist. I get a phone number, I got to call a call center, and then that call center finds me somebody that's probably booked 6 months out or whatever to go, or 6 weeks or whatever to get to see me. And what we're doing in that situation is we're literally kind of just matching up a patient and a provider, like top down. Like that call center person is looking at their call center and saying, oh, here's the first person that comes up that's available. Well, what that's done is it's created huge imbalances in capacity in this country. And what it means is that the reason we all have to wait so long to see providers is because while we're waiting 6 weeks or 6 months to see somebody, there is almost certainly some providers or settings somewhere else that are actually available right now. But the reason they're not available right now is because the health system, they're in some service line that's not known to that call center operator, or no one's done the work to actually see that this particular provider is so burnt out that if they see you, it's going to be a disastrous experience anyway, or nobody's collected the data to determine that if we matched up with this provider, they could see you in half the time as this other person, or maybe get this taken care of virtually instead of in person. And so all of that kind of routing and that matching is usually been done in this country by call center operator, or sometimes even worse, as an individual, you'll go online somewhere and you'll look at pictures of doctors or whatever, and that leads to all sorts of biases and all sorts of things that go down a bad path here. When really what needs to happen is somebody needs to unify all of this data and say, let's look at everybody that needs help and everybody that can provide help, and then let's predict essentially what the best matches are going to be. So the person that's going to be best for you may be first available, but it also may be, if you just wait another, couple minutes, they can see you in half the time. They can do it at half the cost, so it doesn't break the health system. Do it from the comfort of your own home, blah, 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 and make sure that everybody is kind of aligned in a way. So now that matches work for the provider, the health system, and the patient. And what the net of all that, it gets complicated, Sean, but the net of all that is, with the health systems we work with, they're able to see now, and these are all health systems that start, when they first start working with us, start from the premise of we don't have enough capacity to see any more patients. We can't help any more people. We got to turn people away. After they work with us, they are able to see about 30% more patients, and they're able to increase their capacity about 40% without hiring anybody new, because they're able to match better. And what that means is more people, like my daughter, get care faster and better as a result of that. And that's the problem we're working on. That's what motivates people to be part of this. And that's why
I'm literally like, okay, I'm quitting fuel. I'm coming over. It really is transformational and super cool. I did write this down. I'm like, okay, so 30% of the bookings are new patients, 90 plus patient net promoter score. That's insane. And then some of these other ones that I just didn't understand. So I wanted you to explain them to me, because I was like, okay, if I don't understand them, I just want to make sure that I understand. Some other stats said 350,000 ED hours. What does that mean?
Yeah, so that means
diverted annually.
So we've all been through that, right? Where we're something comes up. My wife just cut her hand actually a couple weeks ago. We had to go to the ED to be seen, and it's a miserable experience, right? I mean, it's like there's no scheduling appointments. You're just sitting there waiting until you're seen. Someone comes in with something more serious. You're going to go to the back of the line. You're going to wait there for hours. In this case, we're able to not everything. Obviously, break a leg, you got to go be seen immediately. But we're able to often find opportunities to say, all right, let's get you in front of somebody virtually if you don't need to be seen in person right now, even though it's midnight right now. But we can do that because we do this with Kaiser right now because we're across all 50 states with them. We can do that though because we can actually have you seen by somebody in this other time zone where they are still working and you're not working right now. So you don't have to go to that ED. You can actually take care of that visit because you're being seen by a provider in a different time zone where they are still.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And so now you don't have to go and do that. Yeah.
And then what's the 8 times downstream revenue?
Yeah. So that's a very nerdy healthcare-y thing, but it matters. And so what this is this is the businessy side of healthcare. So when we get care, and most of us get care, most things that happen thankfully are not like life-threatening, right? So we go to go to urgent care, go to ED, you have to do that, urgent care, kid can't shake this cold. So we go to the pediatrician, whatever. Most things are like that. Sometimes those become the canary in the coal mine that finds something else though, that needs to be addressed by a specialist or something more serious. And that's important for patients, obviously, so that you get early detection on things. And then it's important for health systems too, because just the business side of healthcare, they make a lot more money when they're taking care of things that are more serious than a stuffy nose, right? But a lot of these organizations, so Providence, where we came out of, it's a large faith-based nonprofit, right? So they service, as part of their mandate, they serve everybody. They're not just trying to find patients that they can make a bunch of money on. That's sort of another problem in healthcare. They service everybody. And so what matters then in those organizations is you need to have a model that allows you to, while you're serving everybody, kind of, shake through it and find the folks that are going to need additional help so that you service them as well. Because if you have at Providence, they have a saying, and it's a great one, there's no mission without the margin, right? So in other words, if we go out of business,
right,
we can't take care of everybody.
Yes.
And so you've got to have both. And so like one quick example I'll give you to make it very tangible. I'm so proud of this. We work with this health system in Indiana, Community Health Network. It's one of the larger health systems in Indiana. And we handle all of their access for kind of the low acuity care. So again, urgent cares and virtual cares and primary cares. They have clinics in the back of Walgreens or things like that. And in working with them, after about a year of working with them, we started looking at this downstream that we're talking about, kind of where additional people are needing care. And what we were finding was that, people coming in these low acuity lines, just stuffy nose and things like that, about, I think it was like 42% of kind of think of it as sort of the value of additional services coming from those people just coming in with a stuffy nose were going into cancer screenings, oncology. And it turns out that Indiana has one of the highest prevalence rates of lung cancer in the country because smoking is very prevalent. Get outside of Indianapolis and Fort Wayne, it's very rural. And they just hadn't been capturing those patients in those more disadvantaged areas until we started working together. And in doing so, we were able to get ahead of finding now all these patients that needed to be screened. And the whole game on cancer, especially lung cancer, is early detection. Most people, when they get diagnosed with lung cancer, it's stage 4. And
Wow.
so we're in stage 4, that's not a good prognosis.
And I'm also seeing, I mean, this isn't like in that same category, but just from a business perspective, just the implementation, it says 90 days versus like on average, it's more like 9 months. How are you able to implement into systems, into these IT systems so quickly?
Well,
and then, how are you able to do that?
We have an unfair advantage there in that, and this one thing that drew me to it was that in coming out of one of the largest health systems in the country, there was 4 years of development put in this to do all of those integrations with, and this is the thing. This is why one of the reasons, like the business side, not the mission side, but the business side of the reason I like being in healthcare is these things that are all kind of anathema to the technology world. These barriers, these legacy systems and stuff, that if you have the fortitude to get through them and you get on the other side, your competition gets wiped out. 99.
Clearly.
Nobody wants to do it. And so,
right.
And so you got to have an unfair advantage. And by being in a large health system, having years and years of work with a large, just quite literally one of the largest spenders of all of the different electronic medical records and, customer data systems and so forth, our patient data systems out there, we're able to then get access to those systems that you just wouldn't be able to do if you were one of the digital health companies out there. And unfortunately, while there's a ton of money going into space, most digital health companies do not originate in a health system. And so they don't have this access.
Yeah. It's incredible. So it's clear to me, obviously I read some of the case studies. It's clear to me you're selling into obviously a lot of these different health systems, but how do the patients, like if I'm a patient and I'm at home, how do I find DexCare? Like it's B2B, B2C, like I'm confused about who's the actual end customer.
The customer, the buyer is the health system. The users are patients like you and me. We actually distinguish between consumers and patients. Consumer is somebody that's not yet a patient. Patient is you are a patient and you're coming back. But both of them, and then the providers as well. Providers could be nurses, could be doctors, could be.
So how do I find, would I find, if I'm not in Seattle and I don't know Derek and I'm in Chicago?
So you will never see a DexCare brand. But if you're in one of those areas that I mentioned earlier, where about 25% of the U.S. population is, when you see an opportunity to link over to or click over to urgent care or primary care or even some specialty lines or virtual care, and you start going down a path where one, that care is recommended to you, so you're on their website, the hospital website, let's say, for example, and the first thing that pops up is let's say a virtual care option. Even though you don't have DexCare, it's our decisioning engine that's determining that that's what shows up.
That's so cool.
And then when you get the care, whether it's scheduling an in-person visit or doing the actual virtual visit, if you're in one of those areas, like if you're a Kaiser, if you're one of the 12 million Kaiser members, this would be an example. Then you're using that virtual platform. It'll all say Kaiser. It's all on the Kaiser, look and feel, et cetera. But that's DexCare powering that.
Oh, interesting. So what is who are your competitors?
So it's a hard question to answer in healthcare because everything is so intertwined. The easiest answer though is we compete with legacy systems in the health, the legacy technology in the health system, where IT would prefer just to use what they got and make it easy. That makes sense, right? Yeah. So that could be an EMR, an electronic medical record vendor. It could be increasingly like
I feel like I'm getting stuff through like Charm Tracker or Charm Health or something.
Yeah. So we this is sort of the guts of healthcare, but as a consumer or a patient, you wouldn't really see that. Like our competitors would be like Epic is a big EMR company. And by the way, we don't actually compete with them as much as we integrate into them and amplify them. But sometimes we just need to do some education, usually with the IT department of the health system, to help them understand that these are, it's a 1 + 1 is 3, kind of use our system
I see.
of your EMR,
Yeah.
but that takes some education. So it's more of a competition of sort of perception, if you will. In terms of like the digital health companies that you'll see in kind of a list of venture-backed digital health XYZ. We really don't run into them much because we're kind of at the fundamental level in the health system of making sure that people just get access to care, as opposed to, digital health company XYZ that'll, be focused. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff out there, but they'll be focused on, management of your, I don't know, whatever, diabetic condition or whatever.
Right. Yours is like a broad, not marketplace, but it's almost like a connector of like making sure that,
Yeah.
Oh, it's so brilliant.
We just want to make sure that you can get care and the care you need it. And then,
And what's the business model? How do you make money?
Yeah. So we're an enterprise SaaS company. So the health systems pay us to essentially run, we're critical infrastructure inside the health system to run these access programs, basically. They pay us, and then the users don't pay us. It's all the health systems.
And I'm guessing when you lead with, I mean, just even what's on your website, just some of the metrics, some of the case studies that they're like jumping to get on board. I mean, because there's the ROI for them is so significant. It's
a really strong ROI, and like a lot of businesses, and health systems are businesses at the end of the day, even nonprofits. It's a challenging economic environment for them. They're already kind of low margin businesses, and so having a hard financial ROI, and particularly one that works for everybody, right? If I can see more patients, that's good for patients, and that's more money to me, right? And if I can do it more efficiently, so I can see more without having to hire more people, that's good. That lowers my cost of servicing each. So it sells really well. The challenge in being in kind of critical infrastructure inside of health systems is that, if you're in that, and we leverage this well, but if you want to be in that space, like, you better be ready to sign up for like big lifts, right? Because it's when you're talking about that level of kind of scale and scope, you've got to do a lot of heavy lifting. So we have, the 90-day implementation, right, is kind of unheard of in healthcare, and that provides a ton of advantage. And then we also co-design and co-develop with every one of our customers, because there's always, and that's another kind of advantage of ours. There's always, when you're talking about an organization like Kaiser, largest health system in the country, there's always something else that they want to do to really push the edge here, and that they can, because their engineering team alone for digital health applications alone is the size of our entire company. And so when you work at that kind of scale, you got to be willing and able to kind of go farther beyond where we're even at today to kind of deliver on that broader vision. The good news is that if you're willing to do that, and we are, and step up to that, then that results in large contract values, and that's why we've got a business that's growing really well, and continues to work with more and more customers at higher and higher contract values, and have great funders behind us, and people that really want to go for this.
Oh, it's amazing. So tell me a little bit, you talked a lot about scale, and it's clear that you will continue to scale. What makes someone successful at DexCare as far as the DNA of a strong employee?
Yeah, so you've got to have that passion, as we talked about. It's got to be for healthcare as well. Like I said, this is not the path of least resistance to creating value. So there's a lot of resistance, and so you got to be there. I would say as well, we're continually, you've got to have, I think, an attitude that you continually want to surround yourself and just be better because of the people around you, right? We just don't have a lot of tolerance or time, quite frankly, for somebody trying to build a fiefdom or things like that. And obviously, we would never hire somebody that says, "Hey, I want to build a fiefdom," but you can tell. I mean, you can this world better than I do. Like, you can tell you're interacting with somebody, like, are they really open to, constructive criticism, open debate, right? Being, kind of execution driven, and knowing that, like, they're just a piece of the puzzle that, ultimately, if we do this right, the puzzle should be even bigger than it could have been when they started.
100%. Yeah.
And I look at even my role, like, I've typically only kind of moved out of companies after we've sold them. But that doesn't preclude, like, in my role, if we get to a point where, there's somebody else that can even take it farther than I can, I'm pretty confident in my ability to do it right now. But if we got to that, I care so much about what we're doing that we need to have people all the way to the top, to me, that just have the view that this is bigger than us. And
right.
So we need to keep getting people bigger than us.
Like, you're like, leave the ego at the door, type of thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How would you say you set yourself up typically for a good day and then a good week? Do you have some structure there?
I would say probably the most important thing is I try to make it a purpose to ground. You mentioned workout. That's, I think, one example of grounding. Another is, back to just making sure, I'm spending time with family and doing those kinds of things. I work a ton, like I'm sure you do, and everybody else does that, does these kinds of things. But I still make sure that, if I'm not traveling, that, I'm still at home for dinner. Right now, that may mean that I'm back online, from 8 to 1 in the morning or whatever, but there's still a time, right? Where I do think, like, having that grounding, we still take vacations, we still do all these things. There is this, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, and you have an opinion on it, right? There is this, it does seem like we've moved from, I think pandemic has driven this, from work-life balance to work-life integration is sort of the word used a lot more.
Okay, my final question for you is, what fuels you?
Good job working
that
into the
little plug.
Very well done. Yeah. I know it's coming back to a bunch of stuff, but it's the problem, right? I personalize, and I tell the team this too, like, I personalize this work immensely. Like, I in my daughter's situation now, unfortunately, the standard of the state of the art for, if you've got a solid organ transplant, not just kidneys, is that you're on a therapy regimen, a cocktail that simultaneously, keeps your body from attacking the organ as a foreign object, and at the same time, kind of eats away at the organ as well. It's toxic to the organ as well, and that's just the best they got right now. Someday we'll 3D print organs that are compatible, and won't have to worry about this, but not yet. And so it's a little bit of a time bomb, right? And so I know, we're still high utilizers of healthcare in our family. We were just there this morning. And so, I look at, like, so she's going to need more surgeries, going to need another organ. She's only 16. She's going to need, continual management. Scariest time for a parent of a medically complex child is right at this age, because this is the age where, they don't want to take their meds and this kind of stuff and go off to college and all that kind of stuff, right? That's where bad things happen. And so I personalize all this stuff, because I truly believe, Sean, and I saw this in my last company on the surgery side, like, there's a time where I know, like, it's going to be, because we did this thing, it makes it a little bit better for her. And so that's super motivating. It also, I sit on the boards, and I co-founded and chair some of the leading kind of data sharing networks in PEDS around the country right now, where we're just continually making sure that the leading centers around the country are sharing best practices and implementing best practices in order to make care better at the bedside. It's just like, I want her to have better care, and it's going to, I know it's going to result in that if we stick to this. And I also know that we just, like, have to. I'm her dad.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.